We are live on Facebook. Hello,
Awesome.
Facebook friends. I am Love Coach Scott Catamas, and I am really excited tonight on Straight Talk with Scott and Rox. No Roxy. Tonight we have Veronica Monet, who, according to Roxy, is a legend, the legendary Veronica Monet. So, who actually just froze? Her camera just froze. So,
Oh
oh, you're back. Okay, there
no.
you
I'm
are.
back. Yeah.
Hey.
It's not a great time. Unfortunately, at 7:30, that's when everybody hops on Netflix. So,
Mm, that makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
Um, well, I'm gonna put the spotlight on you for a moment because people know who I am. They get
Right.
a lot of Scott Catamas, but not everybody gets a chance, at least in my world, or people that kind of have been coming to our shows, to know Veronica Monet. So I'm putting the spotlight on you.
Okay.
And while people feast their eyes on your beauty, um, I want to really honestly, sincerely from the heart say one of the things I really appreciate about Veronica is she's very, very smart and she's very, very wise. And those are two separate things. Wise people are not always smart, and smart people are not always wise.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
nice
so,
call.
but not only is she smart and wise, but she's also very, very sexually wise and educated. And so, this being a show called Straight Talk, we're certainly going to have some straight talk about sexuality.
Absolutely.
But we also want to talk when we were, she has a beautiful quote about hope. Some of you might have seen it. I posted it on my wall today.
Hmm.
And in this time of unprecedented history on this planet, a lot of people are going through really, really hard times, and it's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to start right off with when somebody they're unemployed all of a sudden, they don't know how they're going to pay their rent, they don't know how long coronavirus is going to last, their
Yeah.
parents are right in that age group where they're highly vulnerable and they're really scared. What do you say to that, to a person like that?
Well, thank you for posting my quote. I don't usually quote myself. That feels weird. But there is a saying in 12-step recovery that I often um, cling to, and that's don't quit before the miracle. So one of the
Mm,
things that I was saying was that I think we can have hope, but we need to make sure we're investing the sweat to make our dreams come true. So there's always an opportunity for us to help the universe materialize those miracles. I don't think just you know praying and wishing are all that constructive. And I guess actually, Scott, I got to say this actually goes back to another thing that's a favorite of mine, which is the Serenity Prayer,
mm,
where grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I cannot change the fact that we're having a global pandemic, and the courage to change the things I can. So how I face the global pandemic is that's key.
mm,
And there's so many things that we can do if we don't lose hope. And I guess for me, hope is about a belief that whatever trials and tribulations I'm going through have some value to my soul's journey, to the refinement of my soul. So I want to face it with as much grace as I possibly can instead of feeling sorry for myself. Um, and that there's stops and starts in that. Those first couple weeks for me were pretty rough. I cried a lot. I'm sure that a lot of people have cried, and there's a lot of people that are still crying. I'm very blessed. I don't actually know anybody that has COVID-19, haven't lost anybody, haven't been frightened of losing anybody. But it's for those of us who aren't suffering as much as others, I think it's actually important for us to take care of ourselves, feed ourselves emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, so that we can be there to support people who are having a harder time. So um, I think that's kind of my version of hope. It's staying positive, being grateful, because there's always something to be grateful for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm posting this on a few different groups. Um,
Doggies.
the doggies.
Doggies. My dog doesn't bark. She just, you'll occasionally hear her little pitter patter of feet.
Oh, I love the sound of little pet. Actually, my favorite is when they're chasing each other. The pitter patter of,
Oh, right.
that's just like. So, talking about crying for a moment. One of my love coaches, we in our morning show today, she's talking about how she needs to cry every day. That every day she needs to cry just to release. And first off, all tears are welcome. Male, female, transgender. Crying is healthy.
Yeah.
It's healthy to cry. It's healthy to emote. It's healthy to move the energy.
Yeah.
And as I've worked with clients, as I do these interviews, there's a common theme emerging, Veronica, which is that it's really like waves. There's like the big global wave of, coronavirus coming around the world.
Right.
And it may make a few waves. We don't know yet.
Right.
But then there's our own personal waves of emotion where some moments it's just like normal life. And then other moments we're in the awareness that everything has changed. And in truth, we never will go back to normal, right? That's not going to happen. And none of us know what is going to happen, but we know we're not going to go back to normal, right?
No.
Where we were, what was going on, it's not going to be the same.
No.
And so allowing ourselves to go through the waves of emotion, and those waves don't all have to be uncomfortable waves. Some of them can be waves of excitement. Some of them can be waves of passion. Some of them can be waves of new opportunity, as well as the waves of fear, grief, mourning, sadness. So all emotions are welcome, all emotions, and encouraging people that not to stuff emotions that are uncomfortable for them. There's no such thing as a bad emotion or a negative emotion. There's just uncomfortable emotions. Yeah.
Yes, well, a lot of emotions are uncomfortable, aren't they? But in my experience, those uncomfortable emotions are actually what get me to the bliss. So it's kind of, I know this doesn't work for a lot of people because some people hate working out, but I'm not one of those people. I actually love working out. So to me, I go into the gym, or I used to. Now I'm trying to work out here at home, and it's uncomfortable. It hurts. But oh my God, I love how it feels afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, uncomfortable emotions are really like that too. It's like, oh no, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that. Okay, I'll feel that. I'm fine. I'm surrendering. I'm gonna feel that. And then on the other side, I often experience something of a rebirth.
So what would coming back to your beautiful idea about hope, where does hope fit in right now, just for you personally? We'll talk about for the macro in a moment. For Veronica Monet, where does hope fit in right now?
I hope that I'm more selective about how I spend my time moving forward, more selective about who I spend my time with, and that I remember how agonizing it was to feel separated from other human beings, to not be able to hug them or touch them. There's a way in which I took all of that for granted. I didn't realize how much I depended on that, how much it meant to me. I kind of always talk about how I thought animals were better but oh my God, people are so important. I see my internet's unstable again. So that's my own evolution, a deepening of myself to where I realize that I love people, and I also really want to be selective about how I spend my time. Now, I don't know how much of that is because I just had a birthday and how much of that is because of the pandemic, but that's kind of where I'm hoping for that evolution in myself.
And just going back to missing physical touch, missing
Yeah.
that, and you can say anything on the show. How do
Right.
you manage that? How do you manage meeting your needs for physical touch and even
Yeah.
sensual pleasure?
Well, I have a life partner, but I'm in a poly relationship, so we're not together the whole time. And that wasn't at all challenging to me before because I was out flirting and hugging all kinds of people. So, so now I'm realizing, oh wow, there's like a deficit here. And I think I've always had a self-pleasuring practice, and I say practice because it is actually a spiritual path for me. I bring in a lot of growth and learning and awareness into how I self-pleasure, but I haven't really noticed that any uptick in that. So I actually have been moving towards meditation, Scott. This is something
Mm.
that's always been very difficult for me. I have a lot of complex trauma, very abusive childhood. So meditation is really highly recommended. It's supposed to be a great thing, but I can only do it in my Kundalini yoga, which is hardly meditation. It's like, a lot of Kundalini breathing and pranayams, and which is wonderful. But now I've just been sitting silently. And I can't do it for very long because I don't know what I'm doing. And this is brand new to me, and I still have a low tolerance for it. But I think that to answer your question, I am reaching into myself for more contact, more connection with my soul. And that's really what this pandemic has directed me towards.
Mm.
So I'm getting a lot of insights when I do that, even though I don't know what I'm doing. And it's actually kind of scary.
Oh.
For me, I'm always going inward. I introspection, taking responsibility, all great, but being busy in the world and kind of distracting myself from some of that early pain has been kind of a default setting, and I'm having to outgrow it now.
Mm. I'm really appreciating your vulnerability of sharing that.
Mm.
There's a lot that you just shared that, a very difficult childhood, the
Yeah.
desire to do, the
Right.
challenge of really sitting and going within and looking at some of the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems, as best as I can tell, that that's really up for a lot of people. I mean, as a coach, I am just fielding call after call, text after text from clients, some of whom I haven't heard from in the longest time,
Yeah.
that, oh my God, Scott, stuff's really up.
Mm.
And it seems to be up in three areas. It seems to be up in the area of my relationship to myself, which is what you just talked about.
Right.
Also up in my relationship to that which is greater than myself, whether you call it God, higher self, higher power, the universe, source. There definitely seems to be a lot of increased attention on what is my relationship to life, you know, as we face the possibility of death, as people we know face the possibility of death, as we're
Mm.
sequestered and all the or so many distractions have been
Yeah.
eliminated, right?
Right.
And you can still find ways to get distracted, but so many have been eliminated. And I'm noticing that most of my tribe, and I have a very big tribe,
Yes, you do.
are putting a lot more attention into their relationship to that which has a thousand names.
Mm.
Whether it's through meditation or through yoga or through a religion or through a musical instrument, any form of practice that helps us to connect to higher power. And then, of course, the third area that people are really struggling with and needing support is the relationship to the people in their immediate world.
Yes.
Especially people that all of a sudden are having to live many, many more hours a day in a small space with people that there were challenging relationships, whether it's your children
yeah,
or your
totally.
lover or whatever. So it's a time that we're really having to look at our relationships to self, to the divine, and to each other, and really
Well put.
do inventory, right? Like what's working and what's not working. What have I been
Exactly.
avoiding? What have I been avoiding? You know?
Yeah, and Scott, it was an interesting thing. So, because I do believe in um, a universal divine energy that has some wisdom and is really motivated by love. Um, I suppose that's where my hope comes from. I believe that things happen for our benefit, even the catastrophes, even the bad
Mhm.
things. So I'm looking always for what am I supposed to be learning from this? And one of the things that I'm seeing is there were some major splits in my little community here in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area, just about a week before the pandemic hit. And it was very interesting. It was almost as if the virus had introduced some energetic reality that was causing people to fall apart and split and have fallings out. So, for instance, here locally, we had a thing with the Kundalini Yoga tribe because there was this brand new book that came out by Premka. And for some people, this was news about sexual perpetrations. And so, oh my God, just this was such a big part of my life. And there was such a split in the community, and people polarized and got hostile towards each other and judgmental towards each other. And then this pandemic hit, and I just felt like, wow, I wonder if those things are related. I don't know. I don't know if they are. And maybe that's just what happened in my little world. Maybe that wasn't happening in other people's worlds. But it seemed to me like there was something in the air besides COVID-19. Oh.
I was muted. That's
Aha!
interesting. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I also do believe that there is a kind of a divine purpose to the big things that happen. There may not be divine purpose to what I had for dinner tonight, but I do think there's divine purpose to something this big. And of
Right.
course, that's where a lot of people are wondering, about what does it all mean? And something that I just want to encourage people, don't go down the rabbit hole of trying to figure it all out. Because you know
Mhm.
what? You can't. You can't. None of us know for sure.
Mhm.
And most of the people I know that are handling it well are doing what you're talking about. They're working on their relationships, they're meditating more, they're writing a book, they're doing more practice, they're spending more time with their family. The people that are really struggling are the ones that are on the computer 10, 12, 14 hours a day reading the news and
Oh,
trying to figure out what it really means.
oh my God,
Now,
are people actually doing that, Scott?
oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's
I was
horrible.
working with a couple and they're fractured because she refuses to see her lover. They live separately because she's
Right.
so afraid. She's like totally sequestered herself, like
Uh-huh.
nobody in or out, including her own lover.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and she's spending all the
Yeah.
time on the computer trying to figure out what's going to happen, right?
Oh,
And so it's just let's not go there, really, let's just not
no,
go there.
to me, knowing that there's a divine purpose behind something is not, that doesn't mean we go investigate it and try to figure it out. Figuring things out is part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Just like get into the flow, have an intuitive, energetic connection to yourself, to others, to the everything around you. I think this is one of the things we can still do, those of us who live where there is some place to actually walk in nature, is walk in nature, and getting out in nature really can reconnect you to your roots, because that is, whether we often forget because we're so mechanized that we actually are part of nature. I don't know how
Mm.
much of that you were able to hear because I see my internet.
So the way we'll handle that in terms of your internet is if
Yeah.
you freeze completely, I'll
Yeah.
take over talking. So as long
Okay.
as I'm not jumping in playing rescuer, we're hearing
Then
you.
keep going.
Keep going.
Okay. Keep going. All
And
right, you got
yes,
it.
yes, on time and nature. In fact, the reason I was a little bit late was because I really wanted to get a walk with the dogs in. So
Oh, good
that's,
for you.
oh,
Good
I've got
for
to do
you.
that
Well,
every day.
I
I've got
took
to
my
do that every
dog for
day.
a walk too.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
to. Yeah. Yeah.
So
No.
yeah, connection to nature. More about that on your end, how you're utilizing that.
Well, they say that the trees actually can change your energy. That they're a big presence, and your DNA will start to kind of sync with the trees. So let's say you're all spun out and you're feeling bad about yourself, and you're full of anxiety. The trees are they're pretty happy. They're
Mm.
solid. They've seen a lot. Um, so I like getting around the tree. Sometimes I even like grounding myself by touching a tree because they have a lot of ancient wisdom, and they have, well, they haven't seen it all because they probably didn't see the dinosaurs, but but they have seen a lot. And so there's some stability there. If I'm lacking stability, I think the trees are really helpful.
I want to riff on that for a moment because it is true. It's when I go for my walks, a little game that I play is to, because it's pretty much the same walk every day. I mean, there's a few different variations, but what
Right.
haven't I seen before? What bush, what tree haven't I noticed before? Certainly, the sky always looks a little bit different. And so that's a game that I've been playing. And I'm lucky, I live in a beautiful place with a beautiful view of the lake and there's mountains. And right now, it's still a little bit light out, so I can see, the fog creeping over the mountains, which is really cool.
Right.
But for all of us to just find little things to be grateful for, you know?
Scott, I worry about the people who are living in high rises and apartments and who only have concrete below them. And one of the things that I think could be helpful is to get a plant or maybe a couple of plants. But if you actually are interacting with that plant, plants respond to love, they respond to talk, and they also can bring us some connection to nature. So I just think
It's
that's so
interesting that you said
important.
that because I was showing off. I'm so proud. These are roses from off my rose bush, not
I
rose
wish I
tree.
could smell them.
Oh my God, they're so gorgeous. And
Oh,
we didn't have, I kept asking the woman who kind of does my gardening, when are my roses going to arrive? When are my roses going to arrive? Because
yeah.
the tree had been bare, or the bush had been barren for months. And so and literally wherever I go today, I mean, I'm mostly at my desk, but when I was
Mm.
working from my bed, I brought the roses with me. And I'm
Oh,
like,
but they smell good.
oh, they do.
Uh.
Ah. And I'll tell you an interesting story about that. Where I live is wildfire country.
Yes.
And every year for 5 years in a row now, we've had like major wildfires.
Mm.
And 4 years ago, we had one very close that wiped out Harbin Hot Springs. It
I
took out
remember.
2 houses across the street from me. Um, uh, it took out a lot, hundreds and hundreds of homes. And the people who had lost their homes were set up in a kind of the local park here is where they some of them were camping.
Oh.
And at the time I was with Emily, and Emily and I went to kind of bring food to these people and bring them comfort.
Mm.
And there's this one woman that we were talking to, and God bless her, she had lost everything.
Wow.
She had lost her home, no insurance. She had lost her cat that was
Oh my
inside the home when it
God.
happened. She was
Oh
away.
my God.
She lost her dentures and her teeth. She lost everything.
Oh.
But then you talk about hope, or you talk about looking on gratitude. And I swear to you, what I'm saying, I'm not exaggerating. She talks about everything she's lost. She goes, but you know what? My tulips survived. My
Oh.
tulips made it. And she was so excited that her frigging tulips had survived the fire. And it was just like, oh my God, talk about gratitude moment, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So God
Wow.
bless that woman where she is now, because I'm still remembering her 4 years later. We're finding something to be grateful for in the midst of
Yes.
just such horrific loss.
Yeah, and the thing about gratitude is that, in my experience, it helps produce more positive outcomes in my life. So it's not that I'm being Pollyannish. It's not that I'm grieving. I am grieving, and I may even get angry. I might get angry at the universe. I might have any number of emotions, but if I can always just reorient myself around the gratitude, I open myself up to miraculous things. I am betting that a lot of beauty came into that woman's life because of her energy, because that energy is going to pull in positive things.
I could not agree with you more, because we are energetic beings. And think about it, people you know who complain a lot, God, life brings them more to complain about. People that are grateful, God, life, energy brings them more things to be grateful for. And even in our human interactions, someone who's really grateful for you bringing flowers, you want to bring them more flowers. Someone who's
Yes,
grateful for whatever you do for them, you want to do more of it. People that
totally.
complain about you, you get repulsed. So it's very much gratitude. You're right. It's not Pollyanna. It's smart. It's
It is
frigging
very,
smart to be
yes.
grateful.
It is, and you can take jealousy and transform it into gratitude too.
Oh, now I want to hear about that because I just was working with a couple dealing with jealousy. So, what's your trick for turning jealousy into gratitude?
Well, I'm going to start with something that has nothing to do with relationships. I lived up in the woods for 8 years after my divorce. And I thought it was going to be really awesome living in the forest because I thought I would have lots of views. Well, in the forest, I was actually kind of cocooned by a bunch of really tall trees. And I couldn't see anything. I could see the stars, but I couldn't see any sunsets. And I take my dogs for a walk. Um, and on the other side of the road where I was, the neighbors had a beautiful sunset view, and I would see their sunset every night. And the temptation to feel jealous and to want to have my house on that side of the street was really powerful
Oh,
for me.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I started a spiritual practice, and what I did, I would intentionally walk by at sunset, look at their gorgeous sunset, and say a prayer of gratitude for them, that I was
I
grateful
love
that they
that.
had them.
I love that.
And
So you
lo and
start practicing
behold,
sunset compersion. Sunset compersion.
yeah, it totally was. So, needless to say, I have an amazing view of the sunset every night. Because the house that I live in now has got these giant picture windows, and it faces the western sky, and I see a sunset every day without even leaving my house. And I felt like the universe was responding to my gratitude. I didn't intentionally go find a house that had that western view. That wasn't actually in the description of what kind of house are we going to find. It's just the one we ended up getting, and I was like, are you kidding? Here it is.
I love that. I want to for a moment do a shout out to the people watching, and I want to acknowledge we've got a couple people in our webinar room. Hello, Dan. Hello, Jewel. Please use the chat box and say hello and let us know if you have a thought, a question, or if you even want to come on and be on camera with Veronica Monet and Scott. And likewise, for people watching at home, share this. If you enjoy anything that Love Coach Academy is doing, we're coming to you 2 or 3 times a night now, or a day. Share it on your wall, share it with your friends. And when Veronica's chatting, I'm going to try and take a look and see what's happening in the chat box, both here in the webinar room and also on Facebook, and respond to any thoughts, questions, comments. And I want to acknowledge our mutual friend, Veronica, our mutual friend of Veronica and I, Paloma, is watching. So we
Yay!
love you, Paloma.
Hi,
We love you very
Paloma.
much.
Love
Yeah.
you.
So, all right. So you did good with the sunsets.
Yeah, so
You
how do we
practiced
apply
sunset
that in
compersion.
relationship?
You're a
So,
smart woman.
you know what I think I don't know if this is true for a lot of times what'll come up for me if I'm feeling jealous is I might actually get competitive. And it's like it's something that goes on inside. It's not an overt. I'm just too evolved to do anything overt, you know. So these are just like my little dark, dirty secrets of jealousy and competition. And I'm mostly tracking how it makes me feel. I do not like the sensation. And so I am actually, whenever I have that competitive, jealous feeling coming up, I'm saying a little prayer to release it. That I just don't want to be weighted down by those kind of emotions. They don't have any role to play in my life. So that's a conscious decision. And I do believe in prayer. I pray for the things that I want to bring to myself. Um, and usually that is not stuff. It's my own personal development. I'm just really trying to align myself with my soul's evolution. So that's where I'm at right now with that. I suppose if I backed up and think about the journey in general, one of the things that I often did was I'd find people who had achieved more in some way, and I wanted to achieve that as well. And rather than be jealous or competitive, I would go work for them and learn from them and kind of study them. Like, how did you do this? Teach me. So I would just like become students of people that I might have, if I hadn't taken that road, I might have gotten jealous. As far as sex, because I know probably a lot of people are like, what do you do if you're jealous of sex? Um, that's a problematic one for most of us, I think. No matter how much compersion we try to practice, I think those feelings are always going to be there to some extent. Um, it points to our vulnerability. I think it points to our desire to feel special, and and I think it also really asks us to decide what our healthy boundaries are. Because even in poly relationships, people have all different kinds of arrangements about how they want to express polyamory. And I think it's really important to honor that and realize not everybody does poly the same way. And I don't think there is a right or a wrong. I think it's important to know how you're wired. Some people are actually more monogamous, some people are more poly, some people are more promiscuous. So to not have any judgments about those different relationship orientations, I think is really important. So that's kind of a starting point, in my opinion, Scott, is not to judge the jealousy, to ask it questions like, are you telling me, because I have this jealous feeling, is this an indication that I don't really want to be in this kind of a relationship? Maybe it doesn't, maybe this is not really a good place for me. I never try to fast track my clients into not being jealous. I try to help them explore why they're jealous and what that actually means, what they might learn about themselves from that, and what they might learn about relationships. If there's some way that I can kind of help them open up the relationship a little bit because they've expressed a desire in that direction, then great. I'm happy to help them navigate that terrain. But I don't ever want to assume that that's the best path for anybody.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, we twinkle in Love Coach Academy. That's like our
Yes.
way of saying thank you.
Thank you.
You know, it's funny because I was just doing a session today with a couple where jealousy was an issue that came up. And something that I always like to remind people is underneath anything that's uncomfortable is something we're longing for.
Mhm.
And to pivot into the beauty of the longing. So if you're in human relationship and you're jealous, well, you're probably jealous because you are afraid that you're going to lose something. You're going to lose a certain quality of love or a certain quality of relationship, and then pivot into how precious that relationship is. And I just had that experience. There's uh, two actually wonderful women that are in a relationship with each other, and um, just helped them to recognize that underneath their stuff is just they love each other so much. And
Mm.
when I said that, I reminded them of how much, yeah, this is hard because you care so much. This relationship is so important to you. The tears came, right?
Mm.
And so when we can pivot in anything, any aspect of our life, bringing it back to coronavirus, any area of our life where there's deficiency,
Right.
if we focus on the deficiency, we stay in a very uncomfortable place.
Mhm.
Now, I think it's important to mourn. It's important to cry. It's important sometimes to pound a pillow.
Mhm.
But then after we've kind of allowed ourselves to go through the uncomfortable emotion, then to embrace the beauty of our longing. Underneath that, what am I longing for?
Mm.
Oh, I'm so longing. And I honestly, I practiced that 8 years after my wife died. The beauty of my longing for her, that I still miss her, that I still long for her, that I see these roses and they remind me of her.
Oh.
And it's a wonderful way to stay in connection to what's really precious in our life. And what's precious are what we long for. Our whole
Mm.
life is longing for breakfast, longing for rest, longing for love, longing for respect. So
Mm.
recognizing what is it moment by moment that I'm actually longing for.
Yeah.
And if I'm blessed to be experiencing it, how wonderful, how blessed I am. And if circumstance is such that I'm not experiencing it directly,
Yeah.
I can still appreciate the beauty of the longing. Right?
Mm. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Dan wrote something. Um, Dan writes, I find that I prefer polyamory to monogamy because the notion of one person asserting ownership of another, what they can do, who they can be with, what they can do with their bodies bothers me. My wife and I let each other do what we want with other people, male or female. The exception would be if they disrespected either or both of us on a large scale.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's if you're going to do polyamory, which is, don't try this at home, kids. Um, without proper coaching or without proper
Yeah.
manuals, right?
No. And even the coaches get it wrong. Um,
I coach the coaches. I got to be careful because I'm the one who coaches the coaches.
I used to teach poly because I thought I knew something about it. And now I'm just kind of like, oh my God, I was so ignorant.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I will say this briefly. First of all, Dan, that's powerful that you and your wife are pulling that off. I definitely really, especially like that, there has to be respect for all involved. And open relationship polyamory is very complex. It requires a lot of emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And I believe it requires genuine care for everybody in the constellation,
Yes.
everybody involved, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and the last thing I'll say is move at the pace of the slowest person, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if, whoever's involved, the two, what's the person with the slowest pace? That's the pace setter.
Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts that
Scott,
you have about that?
I do actually. I think it's really important not to um, promote the idea that there's a one size fits all for poly. I think it's really important to know that there's poly V's and there's poly fidelity and there's all kinds of poly. And you could be in the poly community and have nothing but polyamorous friends and find that each couple or throuple or quad or how many ever people are involved expresses that differently. There's all kinds of things that have to be negotiated, from safer sex practices to um, what night we're doing this and what night we're doing that, how much time are we going to share resources, are we sharing money, Do we have contracts in place, or is this just laissez-faire? There's so many different ways to do poly that you could bring two poly people together and they could be completely incompatible because they wanted to do poly in a different way. They might have only been accustomed to doing it the way their last poly relationship was, right?
Mm.
And if, let's say, you're in a poly relationship and you have an agreement that you can bring another person in, and that person is poly, but they got used to doing it a different way, it's still going to lead to conflict. And I see what often happens is people just kind of use that term poly to mean that they're going to have other sex with other people, and they don't take the time to actually sit down and think about all these contingencies. Because you really got to think about things like childcare and safer sex and finances. Those things are really important. And, do you fall in love with other people? Do you move in with them? Do they come into the house? Do they meet your kids? This stuff is important. So, yeah. So
You
it's not
know,
just a party.
no. Otherwise, polyamory becomes polyagony, right?
Aha.
Instead of multiple love, it's multiple pain, right?
Yeah.
I had a career for 20 years producing television. And one of the shows that I produced, wrote, directed, produced, was very involved with for a long time, was all about responsible sexual decision-making for teenagers.
Mm.
And one of the main points that we made was, if you're not old enough to talk about it, you're not old enough to do it. Or if you're not ready to talk about it, you're not ready to do it. Because what we discovered in the studies is almost all teenagers, their first sexual experiences is when they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or under the heaviest influence of all, sexual attraction, sexual desire, especially for a teenage boy, right? I mean, we talk a lot about what it's like for women's hormones. Try the testosterone level of a teenage boy. It's a whole thing. So, but what's interesting is I spent years writing, directing, fine-tuning it, and then doing that television show and getting it out there. And before that, we'd take it into every high school in California, or almost every high school. But as an adult, it's the same thing. If we're not old enough or mature enough, or the relationships are not solid enough to really talk about the dynamics of what does it mean to kiss? Just what does it mean to kiss? What is your interpretation once we've kissed? What does that mean our relationship is? What is your interpretation once we've slept together? What are all the unspoken agreements, expectations, imaginings each person has? And then there's the flip side of it, which is all of us have what I call an intimacy threshold. And our intimacy thresholds might be very, very different. And anybody watching, and I'll put it out to you, Veronica, have you ever noticed that when you've reached a whole new level of intimacy with someone, either emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, or sexual intimacy, that almost always one person pulls back the next day, or both of you have a fight shortly thereafter? And it's because one or both of you have reached an intimacy threshold, and the ego comes running to the rescue to, remember, we agreed we're never going to open our heart like that again? Hey, do you remember that we agreed we're never going to trust a man again? Right?
Yeah. Or this is too soon after my divorce, or blah, 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 blah.
Whatever it is. And then the ego starts noticing what's wrong with the other person. Have you ever noticed the pimple that she's got? Have you noticed that he doesn't always, he's got that mustard stain on his t-shirt? Whatever it is, we said, he leaves the toilet seat up. Have you noticed that? And so we create this fight or this thing because we're scared to be that close. And it felt so good to merge. It felt so good to be close like that again. And then, what have I done? Oh my God, what have I done? Yeah. Sound familiar?
Absolutely. There's something else that happens too. And I I often, when I'm working with couples who are actually considering divorce, I tell them, I said, look, I'm not here to save your marriage. That's not my job. I'm here to evolve your soul. That's what I'm here to do. So if we can use the relationship between the two of you to help both of you grow so that you will be able to do relationship better, that's well spent time and well spent money. And whether or not the relationship survives or not, well, that's a secondary interest. We'll find out. But let's dive into these relationship dynamics and really work on them so that you become better at doing relationship. And oftentimes what people do is they relationship hop. So of course, the problems that they had in the last relationship just follow them into the next relationship, and oftentimes don't show up until after they've kind of gotten past the warm fuzzies of all that hot sex. Then it's like all of a sudden we're right back to where we were with the last person we were with.
Mm-hmm. You know, I really appreciate at the beginning of what you shared, when people do come to you. And Veronica and I enjoyed chatting with each other because we're both coaches. So we kind of compare notes about, hey, how do you handle this? How do you handle that? And I really like the way that you put that, because it's the same thing. When couples come to me and they're on that fence, should we stay
Yes.
together? Should we break up? I like the way you worded that. I'm not here to decide for you. I'm not here to save your marriage. I'm here to help your soul to grow. That's
Yes.
beautiful. That's a
Yeah.
really beautiful framing of it.
Yeah.
So thank you for
Thank you.
that. Yeah. It's interesting. My parents got divorced when I was 10. And when I first started doing this work, I thought, oh, how wonderful. You know, I was aware, okay, this is kind of a healing of the child, you know, that couldn't keep mom and dad together. And I had a whole kind of story that my job was to keep mom and dad together, which I did for 10 years, actually, because dad was getting ready to divorce my mom, and then she got pregnant with me, and he stuck around for another 10 years.
You're sneaky.
Right. And plus I was born on Christmas Day, Messiah complex, all that. Right. So when I started doing this, and there are people that say that Scott has saved their marriage. So I'm grateful for that. But what I didn't realize was going to happen was how often I'm actually going to help people to consciously, lovingly uncouple. And probably about, I don't know, 25, 30% of the couples that come to me, that's actually what ends up happening. I end up helping them transition into being friends, transition into the parts of the relationship that are working, while letting go of the parts of the relationship that aren't working, or resolving the parts of the relationship that aren't working. And I didn't realize that that's what a big part of my work was going to be. It's been a surprise for me.
Yeah. You know, I think for those of us who get into relationship coaching, a lot of times, you know, certainly it's true about you and I. And I was just talking with another relationship coach earlier today, and it just seems like a lot of us grew up watching our mom and dad fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I don't know how many times I was sitting at the dinner table going, but you guys aren't listening to each other. So
Yeah.
now I get to help people, even though I couldn't help my parents. Yes, I couldn't.
I think that is true. I mean, it seems to be with almost all of our professions, especially when we're in right livelihood, there is an element of wanting to heal the ancestral lineage, wanting to contribute. And just on that for a moment, I really do believe that a significant part of our life is to, of course, work on our personal stuff, but also to do our best to change the ancestral lineage. And bringing that to you, Veronica, I want to, in a moment, I'm going to ask you a question about it, but I want to set it up for a moment.
Okay.
A lot of people complain about their ancestral lineage. Oh my God, I'm an alcoholic because my whole family's been alcoholics, or I've got low self-esteem because my whole family is all screwed up. Okay. I also want to remind everyone we live, for the most part, extraordinary lives with tremendous freedom and tremendous abundance.
Yeah,
And that's a result of our ancestors who made incredible sacrifices just
Mm.
for the dream of a better life for their offspring.
Wow,
Going
Scott.
back,
Oh, that's so beautiful.
grandfathers, great grandfathers, they crossed the plains, they crossed the oceans, they fought in wars, they worked 3 jobs, they came into Ellis Island, and they just wanted a better life
Mm,
for us, for
mm,
us. And
mhm.
of course, they didn't have time to deal with their alcoholism. Of course, they didn't have time to deal with their abuse issues or their low self-esteem issues. They were
Yeah,
too busy staying alive and making enough money, barely, to feed the next generation.
yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
could your great grandfather really imagine Whole Foods Market? Right?
No.
Right? When he was
Yeah,
like living on potatoes.
yeah.
So let's not ever curse our ancestors. Let's always honor our ancestors and recognize, okay, we've got the freedom they gave us, and it's up to us to pay it back by using that freedom to work
Mhm.
on whatever issues are carried through the ancestral lineage.
Yeah, yeah.
So, with that as my preface, I just want to
Yes.
acknowledge you, Veronica, because I know a little bit about you, and I know that
Oh,
you do come from a challenged lineage and you've
oh.
done a lot of work to shift it. And I'd love for you to just talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, and well, so we had pedophilia on both sides of the family. My grandmother and my mother were both molested by my great grandfather. And then on my father's side of the family, there was incest throughout the entire family, siblings. Um, eh, and it wasn't just, I mean, there was actually some brutal rape that happened in my father's family. So that's the soup that I was born into. Very religious on both sides, Bible thumpers, holy rollers, and then this dirty little secret at home. And my recovery path absolutely positively needed to have anger and rage in it. There was no way that I was going to heal from being a sexual assault survivor without getting very angry. And I help my clients to also become angry when they need to. So, as an anger coach, I'm not about suppressing or repressing angry. I'm not trying to fast track people into being grateful or forgiving. I do think that the end stage of your recovery path, even from a very painful childhood, is hopefully going to take you to a place of forgiveness. But it needs to be organic. It needs to be something that happens after you process the anger and rage that comes up after you come out of denial. So almost all children of incest have some level of denial about what happened to them and what happened in the home. And as they come out of that denial, it's a really rough ride. And they understandably get very angry. And that's healthy. It's really healthy. So I initially wrote angry letters to my father. Some of them even got published in some women's zines. And that was what I needed to do. Eventually, I just had processed all this pain. I'd gotten lots of therapy, lots of support groups, and I processed the pain to the point where I started having the capacity to circle back and realize that my father was also an incest survivor. And he was an incest survivor born in 1939 who had no words for what was happening to him and his family and no resources, nowhere to go. I mean, and he tried to improve my life in ways that was the best he could do. So, for instance, the environment that I grew up in was actually, believe it or not, healthier than the one he grew up in. So there was a progression. And now the place where I am in my recovery at this point, I almost feel moved to tears sometimes when I see how hard he worked to try to make my life better, and how opposed he was to the rape that was happening in his home when he was a child. But there was so much he didn't understand. There was so much, and he ended up perpetrating anyway, and he did not understand that it was a perpetration. And there is no part of me that excuses his behavior or wants to minimize it. I am living in a place of absolutely positively knowing that what he did was wrong, it was dark, it was damaging, and very painful to live through. But at the same time, I don't just see him as a perpetrator. I see him as my father. And you know what? When people talk about some of the things that they want to do to pedophiles, it really is hard for me to hear. Because I'm like, well, you're talking about my uncle, my grandfather, my dad. These are human beings. I don't want them to die. Um, there has to be a better way to deal with perpetration than just relegating people to prison for the rest of their lives. So that's a real journey. What I just shared takes time. It takes time. So you go through the period of maybe wanting violence against the person that's harmed you. But hopefully you can come back at some point and really start to feel gratitude. And I actually do. I feel grateful that my father improved my childhood from his. It wasn't good enough, but it was better than what he had as a child.
Hmm. So I really want to thank you for that beautiful way of managing it. And I really like the razor's edge balance that I'm hearing, that you haven't demonized or villainized your father, and you haven't done spiritual bypass. You've acknowledged with gratitude the ways that he has contributed to your life, while still holding even the anger and the hurt over the inappropriate behavior. And I
Yes.
really appreciate that balance, that it's not all one or the other, but it's a very holistic way of looking at it.
Yeah, well, we have such a temptation in this culture to polarize, don't we? We want to
Yeah.
go, you're either with us or against us. Um, you're for it or you're against it. You know, you're good, you're bad. You are one of our heroes or you're a victim of cancel culture.
Yeah. I want to thank Deborah. Deborah writes, thank you. This is very helpful. I love how you're guiding the conversation. Deep soul healing, accountability, creating bridges of communication is what is called for, not incarceration for fathers, uncles, grandfathers that you still love. Of course, it depends on how dangerous the perpetrator is or if they're willing to learn and to heal. So thank you for that, Deborah.
Oh, thank you. That's couldn't have said it better than that. That's great.
Yeah. Well, we have reached our hour.
Oh my God.
I know
That
that
went
went
fast.
that was fast. That was
went very
fast.
fast.
Yeah, that's always a good sign. When an hour goes by quickly, it shows we're having a good time. It was good for me. Was it good for you?
Scott, it was fabulous for me.
Okay, right. Well, I definitely would love to have you come back again on either this show or one of our other Love Coach Academy shows.
Love to.
And just a reminder for everybody that we've got every morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, compassionate talk. More and more, we're developing certain themes. And every evening at 6 o'clock, except Saturdays, we've got some sort of a wonderful show where we offer tips, tools, practices. Tonight at 6 o'clock, we had the kickoff of our weekly Friday night show on recovery, how to manage addiction and codependence. And then every Friday night at 7:30, it's Straight Talk with Scott and Roxy. Thank you, Veronica, for joining us tonight in Roxy's absence. And tomorrow night is our big event. Once a week, we have our big Saturday Night Live, the Global Peace Tribe. And tomorrow we've got a great group. We've got Jayu Tall playing music. We've got Tina Malia. We've got Lynn Twist. The theme is Earth Day, preparing for Earth Day.
So
We've
Pachamama.
got Neil Rogan is going to join us.
Oh, Neil Rogan too?
Neil Rogan, we've got Starhawk, we've got Miranda McPherson, we've got a really cool musician named Cornflower. So please, Lord, tomorrow, may I say cornflower and not cornflake? Please, God, when I'm hosting this show tomorrow, may I not screw that one up?
Well, I'm definitely going to tune in. Wow, what a great lineup.
It's a great lineup. It really is. And it's like a new age variety show. So that's at 7:30 tomorrow night. So definitely join us for that. And all the details you can find on my Facebook profile page.
Yeah.
So Veronica, I always enjoy talking to you.
That was
And
really
I have
beautiful and soulful.
I
Thank
have
you,
great
Scott.
respect for you.
Yeah.
God bless you. Anything you want to let people know? How do people get coaching from you? How do people get? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, just to let them know that I'm a sexologist and an anger coach. So I'm often looking through those filters. If you've got any issues with anger and sex, most of us do. That's kind of my sweet spot. And you could just find me over at theshamefreezone.com or just shamefreezone.com or veronicamonet.com or sexwithoutshame.com. They all go to the same place, and there's lots of cool stuff over there, including a relationship IQ test.
Wow, a relationship IQ test. I want to take that.
Yeah. Oh, I think you'll smoke it.
I better. I'm a frigging master relationship coach. I better do that. All right. So shamefreezone.com or Veronica Monet, spelled MONET.com.
Yeah.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you, Scott. Have a beautiful weekend.
Have a beautiful evening. I'm going to stop the Facebook Live.